So here we are at a stone wall, and if we look down, you can see there's some plants growing up it, some clinging on really tight. But what's really lovely, if we look at this corner here, you can see all these tiny little cracks and crevices just make fantastic what we call micro habitats. And if you just take a little look back at this wall there, can you see that most of that moss is actually inside the cracks in the wall? Why is that? Well, you know, this part is very dry, but if I put my hands in here and if you look, you can see that it's a bit more damp inside the cracks. So I brought you a bit further down on the path, and I particularly wanted to look at this bit of wall because you can see, well, for a start off, it's in the shade here, so it's a lot damper, and you can see the moss there. But I don't know, if we look a bit further down here, okay, can you see in that crack, you can actually see soil beginning to form, and from that soil we're now beginning to get plants growing. It's incredible the variety of plants that will grow on a stone wall, and we're going to have a little look at some of them. This is a particularly good section of wall, and here we've got a beautiful ivy climbing up the wall. Now, if you can see just where my finger is, there's these sort of aerial hairs. Ivy gets such a bad name for itself, but you know, it doesn't do a lot of damage. Can you see these hairs, these aerial hairs, help it climb? At the moment, if it was down on the ground, it'd be in the shade, but by climbing up and up and up and up the wall, it gets itself into sunlight, and that's where it can photosynthesize. The other interesting thing about ivy, and I'll bring you back down the wall, can you see just here, the leaves are very, very lobed. That means pointed and bits cut in. But the older leaves often look like this one. Can you see? There's not so many lobes on it. Okay, so you can tell the older part of the plant just by looking at the leaves. This lovely delicate looking plant here goes by the fantastic name of Maidenhair Spleen wort. What a name! Can you see down the middle? You can tell this because it's got this very black stem running down the middle. And if we look, the leaves line up opposite each other all the way up, and they've got this very square look to them. If I just pull the leaf over, we might be lucky, not on this one, but sometimes you can find the spores of the plant. So this sort of plant is non-flowering. Okay, so how it reproduces is on the back of its leaves, it creates little tiny pockets with what we call spores in. Here's another really common plant that you'll see on walls. It's called Hart's tongue fern. If I turn it over, can you see it's got like ridges all the way up? People believed it looked like a deer's tongue. Hart is an old-fashioned name for a deer. It has these big, long, pointed leaves. And when we turned it over, can you see these sort of bumps forming here? This is where the spores are going to develop. This one got me really excited. This one is Greater Scented Liverwort. Now, liverwort is a plant, but just can you remember, like the seaweeds, we said that seaweed doesn't have the veins running up it like a plant. We called that vascular. These are non-vascular plants. If you look really, really closely, okay, we'll see if we can get any closer than that. We'll take a bit back and have a look at it under the microscope, okay? So it says it has a very strong scent with it. So I'm just going to try that out. I'm afraid it just smells very planty to me. Not, I can't pick up any other scents. But apparently it can be diagnostic of these liverworts. So here we are looking at the great scented liverwort, and you can see really clearly the hexagonal structure to it. And in between that lighter green area is actually the air sacs. Liverwort
was called because they thought it looked like liver, and wort is just an old-fashioned name for a small plant. There, if we refocus now, you can get a really good look at those pores, and if you look very carefully, right on top of those dots should be little black holes. That means the air sac is open and it's actually breathing. That darker purple colour means that leaf is a little bit older. You can see the new one growing here.
Here in this section of wall, you can see that there's enough soil. Can you see that this is coming from a huge crack here to support this plant, which is called herb Robert. So we've come a little bit higher at the glen now because I really wanted to show you this plant. This is often seen on walls. This is something called navel wort. Don't know if you look closely at the leaf, can you see there's a little hole in it? So they thought that looked like a belly button. So that's why it's called navel wort. It's also known as Pennywort because the round shape of the leaves look like pennies. And just here, you can see it's just beginning to flower. Now this has got very, very fleshy leaves. The big thing about if you grow on a stone wall is that you need to be able to cope with lack of water. And this is one of the ways that you can cope.
So we haven't really talked about mosses yet, so we're going to take a little tiny walk through this microscopic tiny world. There's two different sorts of mosses here. They are very, very hard to identify. Mosses, can you see here this lovely little almost forest? So it's home for slugs and insects, but also microscopic things like nematodes and rotifers and tardigrades. And we're going to have a look at a tardigrade underneath a microscope later. Moss is a non-vascular plant, but it does need to be moist. It needs dampness so it can reproduce. The other thing about moss is it produces its own antifreeze, so it doesn't freeze over at all in winter. How fantastic is that for such a tiny little plant? And you can see how it just carpets everything. So here we are looking at a tardigrade, moss pig or water bear. They have 8 pairs of legs. The back 2 face backwards so they can grab things. At 0.5 millimetre long, they really are tiny and you need a microscope to be able to see them.
So my challenge this week is we're going to make a moss garden. Really, really easy to make. You just need like a shallow container. I like reusing things like this. It's an old takeaway container. You'll need some pebbles. Oops. And also, if it's going to be a moss garden, you're going to need moss and you're going to need things that you're going to put in it. So first thing we're going to do for the drainage is put some stones into the bottom of the pot. Just like this. Now, please, whenever you take things from nature, be very, very careful. This moss I actually picked up from our backyard. It was just growing on stones, and because it's been very dry, it was actually very easy to pick up. But please don't go and take moss from very sensitive areas like woodlands. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I've got some potting compost here. I always use the non-peat variety because obviously I really want to look after our peat bogs. So we're just going to put a layer on top of the stones. Now, the moss is going to really thank you for getting it nice and wet. So I've got some water and I'm just going to water that soil to make it nice and damp for my moss. And then it's just so easy. You just take your moss and you pat it on top. I've got this moss here, which is called wall screw moss. Fantastic little name. And another one here, common pocket moss. And I'm just using those. Mosses are so hard to identify. It's better if you get them with the little capsules coming up, the little fruiting bodies, okay? So just literally fill up, and I want to make a little bit of texture here, so I'm going to use a different moss, and that's what's exciting about it. Really make it your own. Just press it down, okay? I'm not going to water it just yet, so now I've covered it all here. But this is the fun part. You can decorate it up now. It could be a dinosaur park. It could be a fairy garden.
Mine's actually going to be a garden, a sort of fairy garden, but for mice. So if anyone who knows me wouldn't be surprised about that, because they know I just love mice. So I've kept back a few of what I think are the really pretty pebbles. Okay, and I'm just going to pop those on. And I've got some Christmas decoration here. These are little toadstools, which I thought were just fantastic. Ooh, just clicked on my finger. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to make it a little bit more magical with some magical stars around. Just here as well. And I've got to get my mice in my magic garden. So here they are, 2 little wooden mice. You will need to water it. So whatever you put on here, just be aware that it will get water probably put on it, because moss does like it quite damp. It loves to grow, remember, in those cracks in the wall, which are nice and damp. And it needs that. It actually needs moisture to reproduce. It actually needs that moisture so that it can actually set its spores. So here we go. Just make sure that it's really nice and damp. And it's just as easy as that. Okay, there we go. There you can see my lovely magical moss garden.
Hello, my name is Dawn Dickens. I'm the Education Officer at the Manx Wildlife Trust, and this is what I brought you down into the woods today to have a look at. So this plant here is called wild garlic. If you're walking through it, you'll know definitely, because it has a very pungent garlicky smell. If you look, the flowers are on clusters, and you can see here very, very white, almost star-like flowers. Okay, the leaves are very tongue-like and slightly ribbed. If I turn it over, you can see there's one big midrib down the middle. Okay, and if we look down, you can see the stems are very fleshy, and they go right down to a central point. So this is what we're looking for. We're looking for wild garlic. Now, obviously it is very edible with a name like that, but just a word of warning, if you are going to pick some, please pick it away from where dogs might have access to it, and also well away from roadsides to avoid pollution on the petals. And also, if you ever take anything, if you do forage out in the wild, please don't take loads and loads from one area. Please let some remain for wildlife. Wash your leaves really well in water, just to remove any impurities. And when you've done that, check as well that there's nothing in there that isn't a garlic leaf. And when you're ready, just shake them dry. To make the scones, you'll need ½ a pound of self-raising flour, 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of grated cheese, a handful of chopped garlic leaves, a little bit of beaten egg for the top, and also a bit of milk. Just to remind you, you need ½ a pound of self-raising flour, 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of grated cheese, and a handful of wild garlic leaves. Set your oven to these temperatures. It'll take about 20 minutes to cook the scones. Whilst it's coming up to temperature, grease a baking sheet.
Okay.
Put the flour into a bowl and add your 2 ounces of butter. This is where you've got to make sure you've got really clean hands, because you need to rub that butter into the flour. Okay, rub it in so it resembles breadcrumbs, and then take your 2 ounces of cheese and mix in. So you get the cheese evenly spread through the mixture. Now it's going to start getting very messy, because you need to take your chopped wild garlic leaves and put into the mixture as well. And just get that mixed through it.
You're on.
Take your milk and just add it to the mixture and mix in with a knife. You're looking for a nice sticky dough, so we're just going to keep adding until we get that nice sticky dough where it all begins to amalgamate together.
You're on.
Keep mixing until your dough looks like this, so it's not really overly sticky to touch, but it keeps its shape when you press on it. And then you'll need to put it onto a flour board so it doesn't stick and we can start to roll it out.
Action.
Place it onto a floured board and with a rolling pin, roll it out so it's about an inch thick. Take yourself a cutter and cut out your scones and place onto a greased baking tray.
Okay.
Get your beaten egg and just brush over the top of your scones. This will give it a nice glaze and make them go nice and brown in the oven. And also sprinkle a little bit of grated cheese on top as well, just to give them that little bit more yum. When you've done this, you need to put your scones into the oven on 220 degrees centigrade or 425 degrees Fahrenheit or gas mark 7 for 20 minutes. Okay, after 20 minutes they should be looking nice and golden brown and risen a bit. Just take them out, let them cool, and then enjoy with some lovely butter.